Hi, my name is Chandler Crouch. This video is going to teach you everything you've ever wanted to know about the HOA addendum. I'm going to go through it and show you how to fill out the form in about 5 seconds. Then I'm going to go back through and show you why I'm putting what I'm putting in every single blank and give you an idea about how you can use this addendum to gain an advantage in negotiations. So first, we have to find the addendum. Just Google HOA addendum. If you're in Texas, you're in luck because the first result is the Texas Real Estate Commission. You just click that and up pops your beautiful form here. Put the street address, the name of the association, and the phone number. If I represent the buyer, I'm going to want to check this box. I'll put 21 days there. I will scroll on down and I'll put $100 in this blank and I'll have my client sign it, and that is the end of it. Now, let's go back through and I'll show you why I'm putting what I'm putting in every single blank. The first step is the street address again, nothing special there. Next is the name of the homeowners association. Now this seems simple, but sometimes it can be rather difficult to find the name of the association. If you are not a realtor, Google's going to be your best tool. Just Google to find the name of the association. If you can't find that, then the next step is just to look at other houses in that subdivision and either call the realtors that have listings, or you can find a title company. Most title companies have a directory that they keep internally of all the neighborhood associations. And the big ones are usually managed by 1 or 2 main property management companies. And but the small ones are all disjointed, and the names change and contact information changes constantly. Sometimes they run out of money, contact information is bad, and that sort of thing. So it can be a little bit difficult. If you're a realtor, go on over to the MLS. And in my area here in North Texas, you can find all the information right there on the MLS usually, but sometimes it's not there. And so then you have to dig a little deeper. You can click the little supplemental documents and go over to the section where the seller's disclosure is kept. And on the seller's disclosure, you can find a treasure trove of information, including contact information for the HOA, because sometimes, like I said, the contact information changes, and but the seller's disclosures are usually up to date. So you can find that information there. If the property that you're looking at does not have a seller's disclosure, then you just look for other listings in the subdivision that do have a seller's disclosure. You can usually find all the information you need at that point. All right, let's go back to the document itself and dig in. You have to put the phone number and the name in order for it to be legit. Okay. So what we're dealing with in this addendum is the subdivision information. That's what this is all about. And the subdivision information is broken down into 2 different parts. The first part are all the bylaws, rules, and associations. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as the CC&Rs. It's conditions, covenants, and restrictions. The second part is a resale certificate. The resale certificate is a document that is used by the homeowners association to just establish the change in ownership, make sure that the account is paid due and it's going to be paid off and have a zero balance whenever the ownership is changed. And something that you need to know is that these resale certificates usually have an expiration date, and that expiration date is going to make all the difference in the world in how you use the document. Most of the time, they have a 30-day expiration date, and so that's pretty restrictive on how you can use this. If you've got to order the resale certificate and close the deal within 30 days, then that means that you're going to have one shot at ordering it, or you're going to have to pay to get it renewed. Okay, so you've got 4 different choices here under paragraph A. 1, 2, 3, 4. The first one is says that the seller is going to pay for the resale certificate. The second box says that the buyer is going to pay for the resale certificate. The third one says that the buyer has already received all the information, and now it's just asking about whether or not the resale certificate needs to be updated, and that's what this little box is all about. And then the fourth one says that the buyer does not require delivery of the subdivision information at all. Now, of course, there are a lot more words in here, but you don't have to be terribly concerned with a lot of the other words because there's more language in the contract that kind of takes care of it. So right here it says the seller shall obtain. This one says the buyer shall obtain. And so those words make it sound like there's going to be work to be had. The seller's going to go out and have to figure out how to obtain this thing, or the buyer's going to have to figure out how to obtain it, almost like like they're adding items to a to-do list of work that has to be done. Well, that's not the case, because down here, this says that the title company or its agent is authorized to act on behalf of the parties. So the buyer or the seller really isn't going to have to do anything, because they're going to authorize the title company to do all that's needed to be done. The main thing that we have to be concerned about is who's going to pay for it, and that's the real function of these paragraphs. Now, the other part of this that really ties into the negotiation aspect is the escape clause that's built into the paragraph. So let's just read this in a little bit more detail, and then I'll come back to the number of days and we'll discuss that a little bit further. So it says the seller shall obtain, pay for, and deliver the subdivision information to the buyer. If the seller delivers the subdivision information to the buyer may terminate this contract within 3 days after the buyer receives the subdivision information, or prior to closing, whichever occurs first. So, and then the earnest money be refunded to the buyer. I'll go ahead and finish reading. If buyer does not receive the subdivision information, the buyer, at the buyer's sole remedy, may terminate the contract at any time prior to closing, and the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. So, what this tells me is if I utilize this correctly, I can get an escape clause built into the contract that allows my buyer, if I represent the buyer, allows the buyer to be able to back out at any time within 3 days after they receive the subdivision information. So if I'm trying to gain an advantage or get flexibility to back out of this deal, then I might put a really long deadline in this blank. And it looks kind of friendly on the surface, because you're giving the seller a little bit more time to get this document and deliver it to you. But what they don't understand, or what they may not understand, is that, let's say if you put 30 days in this blank, well, then they might think, well, all we got to do is have this ready by closing, so we can just wait until the end of the contract to order the thing. Little did they know, what they're doing is giving your buyer a last-minute opportunity to back out of the contract if they deliver this document shortly before closing, which can be to your buyer's advantage. So that's a huge, huge opportunity if you're representing a buyer, to be able to give them the opportunity to back out of the contract. Now, the second part says if it's either within 3 days of receiving this or closing, whichever's first. So if you put 30 days and then it ends up closing on the 27th day, then that's fine. The closing date would be the thing that takes precedence. Now, the other thing that we have to keep in mind on this date is how long it actually takes the homeowners association to produce the document and the costs involved, okay? So the homeowners associations, I believe, are given 10 days by law, calendar days, to produce this document. That means if you order it today, 10 days later, they're going to produce the information. And the cost of the resale certificate is usually somewhere between $200 and $500, just giving you a ballpark number. Of course, it can be more or less than that, but let's just say $200 to $500. What most people don't know going into the contract is that if you're asking the HOA company to produce that document quicker than 10 days, then they start charging expedite fees that are through the roof, hundreds upon hundreds of dollars. It's just a lot of money, and it feels wrong, really. But they can do it because they do it because they can get away with it. And you might be thinking, well, a few $100s here, a few $100s there, not a big deal. We're buying a $300,000 house. It's just not a lot of money. That might be true until you realize how that money is actually paid for. Most of the time, the homeowners association company requires the seller to, or whoever's obligated to purchase the thing, they require them to crack out a credit card and give them a credit card number over the phone or put it in a website or whatever, and actually physically pay that money prior to closing. So every single dollar of that fee is felt. And if you're trying to have a positive rapport with the other side of the contract, and then, 5 days into the deal, let's say if this said 5 days right here, 5 days into the deal, you're going to have to cough up exorbitant expedite fees, and because nobody understood that the expedite fees were going to be charged if we were putting a timeline less than 10 days on here. And now we've got to rush that, and then somebody has to pull that money off of their credit card ahead of closing. They're going to feel every penny of that, okay? So you just want to realize the situation you're putting the other party in if you're putting a short number of days on there. So what I like to do is I keep in mind all of these different dynamics. And I usually like to structure the timeline of this structure the timeline of the deal so that I am not spending my client's money unless I have to. So I will structure all of the services and reports and fees to be ordered in the order of priority according to how likely they are to make the deal fall apart. Okay, what I mean by that is right out of the gate, after we get under contract, one of the first things that I'm going to want to be done in the contract is the home inspection, because the home inspection is very likely to cause the deal to fall apart, if anything is going to. I mean, maybe it's not highly likely, but of all the things that are going to be ordered, it's the most likely document that's going to be done, service that's going to be done that would cause the deal to fall apart. Second most likely would probably be the appraisal. Third most likely, probably the HOA documents. Fourth most likely would probably be the survey. And so throughout the transaction, I want those items ordered in that sequence so that it's, let's say, if, for instance, if the inspection was to cause a problem where we had to cancel the contract, then we're not going to have to pay for the HOA docs and the appraisal and so on. Okay, so with that in mind, I typically want this ordered after we get outside of the option period. Okay, so in the option period, I generally like to propose a 5 to 7 day option period. Let's just say it's 7 days. And then let's give the HOA company an additional 10 days to order the HOA certificate and produce that. Well, so that now we're up to 17 days. And now you've got to keep in mind that you usually have a couple of weekends and maybe a holiday, so I'm just going to add in a few days for that. By the time we account for all the days, I'm up to about 21 days. So now what we can do is we can wait until we're outside of the option period, order the HOA resale certificate, then not have to pay any expedite fees and have that thing produced once we're well into the transaction. On the buyer's side, that's a friendly way to structure it. And that also allows me an opportunity to get my client out of the contract if we have an issue while we're pretty far into the transaction. I'll also have a number of other mechanisms in place, like the third-party financing addendum that will give me about the same timeline, but that's the way I do it. All right, so let's move on to this other thing. Well, actually, let's back up. I want to talk for just a minute longer about what you might want to do if you're representing the seller, realizing that this opportunity to get out of the contract exists for the buyer. The Texas real estate contract is kind of unique in that it doesn't allow the seller a whole lot of opportunities to be able to get out of the contract. In fact, I can't even really think about one opportunity, one provision of the contract that allows the seller to get out. I might be missing something off the top of my head, but we at least, if I'm representing the seller, we don't want that buyer to have the ability to just change their mind on a whim and get out of the contract. So I might, in advance, if I'm listing a property for sale, I might call the HOA company and just ask them how long is their expiration date on the resale certificates. If it's a 90-day expiration date, I'm going to go ahead and order that when I'm listing the house for sale. So if I'm getting all the information when I list the house for sale, I'm not going to use this first paragraph at all. Instead, I'm going to come down to paragraph 3. I'm going to check that box, and then I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to let the buyer choose whether they do or do not require the resale certificate, as we're going to find out when we get to paragraph 4. Odds are they do require it, even if they think they don't. So I'm going to go ahead and check the box that says the buyer does require an updated resale certificate, and it says that if the buyer requires the updated resale certificate, then the seller, at the buyer's expense, will get it and deliver it. So that means that this fee is pre-negotiated if that box is checked. And it doesn't really look like it's pre-negotiated because it's not asking who should pay for it. It's just flat out saying the buyer's going to pay for this thing. Now, what I would do is I would check that box. I would provide the information to the buyer's agent. Then I would get the seller to sign this document, and I would upload it in the MLS into the supplemental documents section with my seller's signature on it, and I would provide instructions to the buyer and the buyer's agent saying, hey, if you want to place an offer on this property, here's the deal. Here's all the subdivision information, and here's this signed HOA addendum. Please just go ahead and sign this and include it in your offer. And so that sets up the scenario so that our buyer, or rather our seller, is going to get a little bit more of an advantage in the situation and avoid this huge escape clause and avoid the mystery of who's going to pay for it. It's already taken care of, and then we would move on. You might wonder, by doing this, would this cause the buyer to incur additional expenses and possibly cause a delay or cause the deal to fall apart? If the lenders provided their estimated closing costs and that sort of thing, would, because of the new TRED rules or whatever, would that cause the lender to have to redraft documents and delay and all that? And the answer is no, not likely, but you got to expect anything. I talked with a title company. They said they've never seen that happen. But you should just kind of be aware that if the lender's not accounting for these things because you're checking a box that they're not accustomed to seeing checked, that it's something that your buyer and your buyer's lender is accounting for, so that you don't have a last-minute surprise with a delay because they just didn't see which box you had checked on the contract. Let's talk about Option 4. You might wonder who in their right mind would ever check the box on Option 4. I can give you a few different things to think about. Right off the top of my head, I can tell you if somebody's moving within the same subdivision, they've probably got all the subdivision information that they can need. And then you would ask yourself, well, what about the resale certificate? Let's get to that. That's where this thing gets a little bit crazy. But if the buyer wanted to, and the buyer was interested in making sure they were winning in a bidding war situation, and they knew they were walking in to a transaction where there were competing offers and they were trying to put themselves in the best position to win possible, they might also think, I'm going to check box 4 because it looks so friendly. The buyer doesn't require any of this stuff, so there's going to be less fees and less costs. Well, that may not actually be the case. It does look friendly, but there are additional implications for box 4. Okay, let's go right up to the top. Subdivision information includes 2 different parts. The first part is the bylaws and restrictions, the CC&Rs. Now, you don't necessarily have to order this and pay a fee to the homeowners association to get this information. Oftentimes, the seller already has this information and the seller can provide it. The seller can probably go online and download it off the internet. The buyer can even try and find it online or just call the homeowners association and ask them for it. And in many cases, they can get their hands on this information without having to request it through the transaction itself. Now, there might be some question about, well, am I getting all the rules and the most updated rules and that sort of thing? That's for you to find comfort in or investigate on a case-by-case scenario. But then the question still comes to, well, what about the resale certificate? That's a great question, because even though the buyer doesn't require it, does not mean that it's not required in the transaction. If the buyer is using financing, that lender is probably going to require that title insurance be ordered. And if title insurance is being ordered, the title company is going to require a statement saying that the account at the HOA is paid in full and there's a zero balance upon change of ownership, or else they're not going to provide the title insurance. Well, if they ask the HOA company for the statement of accounts, or whatever you want to call it, if they ask them for that document, there are many HOA companies that will not provide that kind of document unless a resale certificate is being ordered. So there's this kind of chain of requirements here that in most cases, the resale certificate is still going to be required to be ordered. And then also some HOAs just have their own requirement that says if ownership changes hands, we require a resale certificate to be ordered, no matter if there's a title company or a lender or anybody else involved. It doesn't matter. In some cases, it is going to be required regardless if the buyer requires it or not. So then you ask, well, who's responsible for it if that happens? And the answer is the seller's responsible for it. The seller will be responsible for this fee. It may not be a pleasant fee to pay. It might be a surprise once you're well into the transaction. And I typically don't like surprises. I like everybody to be mindful of what they're agreeing to. I just want them to agree to what I want, but I don't like surprises. I don't like, because it could cause the deal to fall apart. But some sellers might get surprised with it and think nothing of it and just pay it. I don't know. It's up to you to figure out the best strategy for you and your client, or if you're buying it for yourself. You just got to determine the best strategy for yourself. Now, material changes means that if the seller is aware that a special assessment is maybe being charged, and that becomes information that the seller becomes aware of once we're already under contract. Then the seller's got to relay that information to the buyer, and there's a contractual obligation for them to do that. There are a number of other things that could come up that would cause the seller have to disclose information. If the HOA management company is changing, they need to disclose that. If anything were to change about the common areas, like maybe if the pool was being closed and they're filling it in with dirt, that sort of thing, then you might need to change that. All right, fees. We've got, it says, except as provided by A, D, and E. So we're talking about A and D and E. If let's see here. If the buyer shall pay any and all association fees or other charges associated with the transfer of the property not to exceed X amount of dollars, and the seller shall pay the excess. So here, what you're really doing is limiting the amount of money that the buyer is going to have to pay for transferring the cost, or paying the cost for the transfer. So if I represent the buyer, I would like to put a nice low number in here. I'm going to put something in the blank, because when we're purchasing a house, a few $100s is just not a lot of money, and it's just become customary to see some amount of money in the blank. $100, $200. It's a friendly amount to put in the blank. It's almost like a conciliatory gesture to the other side to say, hey, look, we're trying to be reasonable. Please accept this addendum. And plus, if you can put a nice sweet number in there that would allow them to agree to this number up here, then that's a small price to pay. It's almost like you're buying an extra option fee, no problem. But the cool thing is this is also saying that the seller shall pay any excess. So if there are expedite fees, or if there is anything extra that the buyer's not aware of, then it's almost like the seller's written a blank check and the HOA company just gets to fill in the blank. If you want to get the exact amount of money that needs to go in the blank, then you should know that this fee typically covers the transfer fee only. And the transfer fee technically is the fee that the homeowners association management company charges to simply put the resale certificate into the new buyer's name. So the resale certificate is kind of a property, it's a property specific thing. It's not a buyer specific thing. And so the resale certificate, if it's updated, then what we're doing is we're basically having to charge a transfer fee for that service. The transfer fee, that's what it's usually called. Sometimes it's called a conveyance fee, or an account closeout fee, or an account setup fee. And in very rare circumstances, you should know that the HOA company and management company could charge their own fees. So most people don't know this, but all the homeowners associations usually are managed by a bigger management company, and in very rare circumstances, each can charge a transfer fee. And in most cases, the transfer fee, regardless of the transaction, is usually about $50 or $100 or so, maximum $200, and that gives you an idea. But you can just call and get them to tell you what the fee is specifically for the transfer fee if you want to be exact. Let's keep going here. Deposits for reserves. The buyer shall pay any deposits for reserves required at closing by the association. So sometimes an association will require a certain amount of reserves to be collected so that that money is sitting aside. And the buyer will have to pay that, obviously. Authorization. The seller authorizes the association to release information and update the resale certificate if requested by the buyer. So sometimes associations don't like to release information to somebody that's not a homeowner in the subdivision. This allows them to do that. And then this is, again, let's see here. Let's just read this. If the buyer does not require the subdivision information to be updated or the resale certificate, the title company requires the information from the association, such as status of dues, special assessments, on, and waiver of rights. The buyer or seller shall pay the title company the cost of obtaining the information prior to the title company ordering the information. So if there's additional information that needs to be gathered, then it's just saying who's going to pay for that. If I'm the buyer, I'm going to say that the seller's going to pay for that. Unless we're in a bidding war, then I might write this thing in a completely different fashion, because winning a bidding war is a completely different negotiating objective than trying to gain an advantage of some sort in the deal, or gaining freedom in the deal. All right, notice to the buyer regarding repairs by the association. So all this is saying is if there are issues in the association of the common areas and you're not comfortable as a buyer with the condition of what's going on, don't just count on that stuff to be done. You just need to be aware that it is what it is. Some associations are crummy. They don't take care of their stuff. Some of them are magnificent. They do a great job upholding the beauty and continuity of everything going on. Sometimes they're you know, a little power hungry. Something that you need to know is that HOA companies can usually foreclose on properties, and sometimes their lien position is really, really strong, stronger than mortgage companies, and I've even heard in some cases even stronger than that without having to stick my neck out there and speak like an attorney. I don't know all the specifics on that, but it's something that you should not mess around with. You want to make sure you're in good terms with your HOA company, and this document is the start of that process. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've got, whenever an agent joins our company, they go through 6 weeks of intense training. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I got a bunch of videos. If you want to get more access to more videos, just subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell icon so you can be notified anytime we upload them. If you ever have questions, comment below. I will answer those questions. And if you need help in negotiating in a contract, we are the best in the business. You can count on us. And if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.